Great. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon here in the Gold Coast. I'm Acting Chief Superintendent Rhys Wildman, the current Acting District Officer for the Gold Coast Police District. Just the purpose of today's news conference is more around providing an update on the border operations, both what's occurring now, what's going to occur tonight, and also in the coming days, what our expectations are, etc., and also provide some advice to the community to try and make the transition across the border as smooth as possible. So to start with, I guess what we led with is at 1 o'clock this morning, obviously the new border restrictions came into place, and police started setting up a series of temporary checkpoints as we move into a more structured approach which commences tonight. The border checkpoints we have at 4 locations. One is at Numinbah, and that is where we're using what's called a Delta Wedge, which is a device that we can lock into place, which prevents traffic running through after hours, but will be open 7 days a week from 7A to 7P. We also have the M1, the Gold Coast Highway, and Griffith Street at present. So we've got those 4 locations being staffed by police, and currently as 11:30 this morning, the advice I received from New South Wales main roads was that on the M1 there was about an 88-minute delay. On the Gold Coast Highway there was a 22-minute delay, and on the Griffith Street entrance there's a 22-minute delay. So we're probably sitting a lot better than where we thought we would be at this time. I fully appreciate that the first 2 to 3 days of putting in our border checkpoints are usually the most challenging for motorists trying to get backwards and forwards across the border, and that's usually on 2 counts. One is obviously we're putting our police checkpoint infrastructure in place during that time period and getting our officers up to speed with the current restrictions, etc. The second part, and more importantly, is the community side of the house. There is a transition of border passes which has occurred overnight at 1 o'clock this morning, and so we're just reminding our community that resides in and around, especially the border zone, which currently is down to the Clarence River local government area in New South Wales, that you need to transition over to what's called the X Pass, which is our border zone pass, so try and do that as soon as possible. Just in relation to what can be done to make things a bit smoother with that border transition. So from a policing perspective, over the last 18 months, we have really led with what we call the CCC approach to managing the policing situation. And that's very much been a compassion, communication and compliance approach, with compliance being the last resort for us, essentially. We understand with the community that this is extremely challenging times, and we're trying to work with the community and appreciate the community support in getting us to where we are at the moment. What we are now asking is that the community adopt a similar approach we call the PPP, and that is very much looking at having the pass, plan and patience. So when we talk about the pass, make sure you select the correct pass that's relevant to your set of individual circumstances. Make sure the pass is completed correctly, and also display the pass. What we found just this morning is that a lot of people are actually using the pass. They're downloading the pass, which is fantastic, but it's on their phone. And whilst that is okay, it's far better for us and for the community to expedite people coming across the border by actually having a printed copy of the pass and having that clearly displayed on your windscreen or on your dash. That will make it far easier for our police to identify you as a border resident and get you across the border quickly. So that's the first part. The second part is planning. So we need you to look at plan your travel arrangements. If you have a medical appointment or something similar and you need to be over the border at a particular time, can you please ensure that you plan ahead, provide some additional time to make sure you make your appointment on schedule, and that'll also reduce the stress involved in trying to get across the border within a set time frame. So the last part is patience. So our officers are really, really good at working through the policing side of managing the communications with people that are trying to get across the border, and we're working with everyone on that front. But there are still going to be some delays. So as I highlighted, the next 2 days is probably going to be the most critical for us around getting these new processes in place and the border passes with the community, make sure everyone's au fait with them. But after that, the real times, the only other times we have to really worry about is during peak hour in the mornings during the week. So there may be some additional delays on that front as well. So I guess the future state. So there's some really important information I need to put forward for tonight. So as of tonight, we're from 7 o'clock tonight, we are transitioning from our temporary border checkpoint arrangement, which is currently using officers and cones and vehicles, etc., into a more structured approach. And that is implementing a series of concrete barriers, etc., at key locations, including the M1 and the Gold Coast Highway. So for that to occur, we will need to close both the M1 and the Gold Coast Highway for a period of time, not at the same time, but a period of time while we make those transitional arrangements. So to start with, it's about 7 o'clock. We're going to commence restricting access and diverting traffic to the Gold Coast Highway, at which stage we will close the M1, we'll put the barriers in place and the other infrastructure that we need to have to keep us ongoing in the coming weeks. And then what we'll do is open the M1 up, we'll move the traffic diversions back onto the M1, have the M1 flowing again, and then we'll have to close the Gold Coast Highway while we repeat the same process. We expect these delays to occur between 7 p.m. tonight and 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. So it's once we get this is the biggest piece of infrastructure and the biggest delays that we'll have to put in place, but we're putting them in place in the middle of the night. So hopefully the traffic restrictions and the subsequent delays shouldn't be too much. From that point on, we have another 2 locations that we're considering in relation to opening up in the near future. One is Miles Street. So Miles Street, we're putting some infrastructure in place there to look at attempting to open that in the coming days as another cross-border checkpoint. And then we're also looking at providing some emergency access in Dixon Street, but that's resource dependent. For us, obviously, we need to consider our policing operations on the Gold Coast here, because in amongst the media attention that the border is obviously taking at the moment, we still have our business as usual operations, and they include traffic crashes, domestic violence, assaults, robberies, etc. All the normal activities that we face on a day-to-day basis here on the coast. On top of that, we also have our hoons. So our hoon operation Tango Vinyl has been extremely successful, but we saw just last weekend that those hoons started to try and reintegrate themselves into the coast here, and as a result we seized another 2 vehicles last weekend as a result of that hoon operation. And we will continue Operation Tango Vinyl into the future, even during the border operations. So there's some really important messages for that to be taken. One other point I wanted to highlight too, that if you are coming from a hot zone in New South Wales or another jurisdiction, you cannot drive into Queensland. Okay, you need to get on a plane, complete your border pass and fly into Queensland, at which stage if you're eligible to remain here in Queensland, such as a Queensland resident, then you'll be required to go into hotel quarantine for 14 days. So if you attempt to come through the border and you've been into a hot zone as a normal vehicle user, then you will be turned around at the border and you'll have to fly in from that. So does not apply, of course, to freight. Freight, we're working with the operators and heavy vehicle companies to make sure that the freight is kept moving. Obviously, we need our supply chains kept as free as possible. So that's where we're sitting at the moment on the border operations. I'm happy to take questions.
For people who obviously can cross the border through the bubble, people who are looking to, say, come to the Gold Coast just for leisure at the weekend, would you say maybe delay that, not come to help ease that congestion?
Yeah, look, it's a good question and it's a really good point. So you'll notice that one of the big changes around the passes, the border passes in that border zone that's been dictated this time around, one of the big changes is that there's a greater number of restrictions this time around, and that's been quite deliberate. So when you look at the risk profile and the challenges around managing the Delta variant of this particular virus, we need to make sure that we're actually doing the best we can to minimise that unnecessary cross-border traffic. And as a result, just coming across for a swim, exercise and so on is not a reason to cross the border into Queensland from New South Wales. There's a very strict number of exceptions that actually allow you to come back into Queensland. And so if you're unsure, make sure you go onto the Queensland Government website, the health website, just type Queensland border restrictions into that. Click on the Queensland Health website and that'll take you directly to the restrictions, etc., that relate to any of the border applications.
Rhys, do you have any numbers from overnight in terms of how many cars were turned around or how many fines were issued, etc.?
No, we had no fines issued. So we did have 4 vehicles turned around up till 6 a.m. this morning. So with those 4 vehicles, though, they were from hot zones attempting to come in by road past the 1 a.m. cut off, and as a result they were turned around, and we'll have to then look at trying to re-enter the state by completing the appropriate pass and coming in by air.
The Chief Health Officer said yesterday the plans are, as has been I guess in previous iterations of this hard border closure, to review it on a monthly basis. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, look, I think the situation is being reviewed because of the Delta strain. The Chief Health Officer is constantly reviewing the situation, and if there's any amendments to be made around the border operations, our intent is to support Queensland Health to deliver this and for them these operations. Once again, it's all about keeping Queenslanders safe, so that's the priority for us.
With concrete barriers coming in, though, should border residents be prepared to kind of live with this for the next few weeks?
Well, I expect that it will be here for the coming weeks, to say the least. Yeah, we don't know exactly how long they're going to be here for. So we're planning for the next few weeks for these on our side. However, if the situation remains as it is at the moment or changes in any way, and we are required to remain on the borders a little bit longer, then we will do so.
There have been calls for number plate recognition technology to help expedite the process for locals. Is that something is that a pipe dream or is that a feasible option?
Yeah, so, and that's another good question, Jeremy. So for us, what we're looking at, obviously, we're still using the layered approach to start with our enforcement of the border. So we're still using the vehicle messaging. So we're getting the messaging out to road users, they can come into Queensland. And we're still using vehicle monitoring, which is what you're talking about. But all we're doing really is switching our operations from the mobile and static intercepts into the checkpoints. So the vehicle monitoring side is a little bit challenging in relation to trying to achieve an outcome of just having people flow freely through the border. There's a number of IT systems that are required to be brought together, and there's some complexity in doing that. So at the present time, we're unable to achieve that. So the vehicle monitoring is very much for us as part of the compliance program.
In terms of hotel quarantining, we've got the NRL families hubs here. Are there any concerns from police regarding that, or I understand you guys aren't actually operating that facility?
No, that's correct. For us, those operations are actually being run in conjunction with operations between Queensland Health and the NRL. Police don't have any involvement in those particular operations. We're obviously, if Queensland Health require us to assist in some sort of enforcement actions, then obviously we'll be called to do such. But at this stage, it's being managed locally between those two agencies.
I know this is something that's been covered before, but once kind of we get it up into past the first few days, people start to get the hang of things. It's still recommended for people to stay on the M1 as opposed to diverting through the back streets, because we've seen a lot of traffic through the back streets in between this morning.
Yeah, exactly right. What you'll find, Mackenzie, is that we will obviously find we'll find the traffic will obviously become a lot more free-flowing, let's put it that way. So it is important to remain on our trunk roads. I'm sure the residents in the back streets don't want people running through their properties, etc., or through the streets around their homes. So obviously the main roads are a priority, and if you're just flowing through from and you're not attending that Coolangatta in that area, then you should stick to the main roads and just keep going north.
Rhys, some residents were wondering, is there other avenues for like emergencies to be able to get through those, not be blocked in the jams kind of thing?
Yeah, so we work closely with not only our own agencies but with other agencies around that, and we're looking at some options around making sure that they do have free access. We do have some arrangements with in the border around about our emergency service getting across if they need to quickly, but obviously I've got to be cautious about disclosing those.
That doesn't apply to, say, resident that might have an emergency and needs to get across?
No, it's far better for the resident to actually ring 000 and have the emergency services come to them rather than trying to get out on the road, and because you don't know where you're going to wind up or the time frame's included.
Is there a time frame for when you want to try and get the Mile Street checkpoint open?
No, we'd like to get that done as soon as possible. Like I said, we're just arranging some additional staff to come in from outside the Gold Coast to support us in those operations. As soon as those staff become available, then that's our first priority, to get Mile Street open.
Are there any issues with scenic ring with the area bordering to New South Wales? Additional police needed for those checkpoints there?
So for us, I'm only aware of the ones obviously here on the Gold Coast. So look, Numinbah, if that's what you're talking about. Numinbah, yes, we've got a Delta Wedge in there, and that's actually, we've got police on there on those checkpoints 7A to 7P each day, and then at night obviously we'll close that off and lock that off, so that's no access after hours, but it's open 7 days a week, 7A to 7P.
And you talked about additional officers. Would that include Logan City just like last time?
No, Logan City obviously have their own, because they've got their own border operations. We're actually reaching further into other areas within the Queensland Police Service.